George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
I have to tell you that no such assurances have been received, and that consequently NATO is at war with Russia. In the dying days of his presidency, Joe Biden just decided that all of us may die. He has finally given permission to the Kiev regime to use long-range American missiles to fire inside Russia and hit Russian cities. The British StormShadow missile will be flying right behind. In both cases, as Putin said in September, Russia will be at war with NATO. Is the Donald Trump presidency going to come too late? Will the world be at war before Trump gets his feet in the door? And in Gaza and Lebanon, the slaughter continues. Even international football stars are being cut down and slain. In the busiest shopping streets in Beirut, Marilias, the latest and a former haunt of mine, was laid waste by Israeli bombardment today. And nobody gives a toss about it. Nobody even reports it. And having run out of domestic enemies to alienate, Keir Starmer had a brainwave. Let's fall out with the rural people in Britain's countryside. Let's punish the farmers. But the farmers can fight back and seem ready to do so. No farmers, no food. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Well, I've had to scrap everything I was going to say. In the last 5 minutes, news broke, predictably in the war foghorn, the New York Times, that Joe Biden, whether he is sentient and knows about it or not, has lifted his previous embargo on the use of American long-range missiles, the ATACMS system, which can strike deep into Russian cities and will do so if not revoked. The problem is, Vladimir Putin already said such a decision would mean war between NATO and Russia. Maybe they think Putin is bluffing. I'm here to tell you, as someone who sat with him in Kazan just a couple of weeks ago in Russia at the BRICS conference, he ain't bluffing. Do you feel lucky, punk? Did I fire 6 shots or only 5? Do you feel lucky, punk? Well, I promise you, you should not feel lucky. Putin isn't fooling. He will regard any such use of long-range Western NATO missiles striking inside Russian cities, killing Russian citizens in their homes and at their workplaces as a casus belli a war between Russia and NATO. This is no small matter. Dwarfs everything else I was going to say in this monologue. But let me try and explain just how serious it could get. The Russians will have to respond to any such missile strikes. They have bombed everything that can be bombed in Ukraine without turning on the civilian population, which they have no intention of doing, figuring that this would only rally the people of Ukraine behind their regime just at a point when the people are turning against Zelensky in a very formidable way, but also because they regard the Ukrainian people as part of them, as indeed they have been for many centuries. This mere interregnum of Kiev defying Moscow is, of course, an anti-historical phenomenon. The Collins Dictionary, the Oxford Dictionary, in 1945 described Ukraine as the borderlands of Russia. That's how the Russians see it. They don't want to bomb the civilians, so they are bombing the civilian and military infrastructure, but they're running out of targets. How then are they going to respond to these long-range missiles? Well, I think I can tell you without betraying any confidences that they will strike NATO assets, and very, very powerfully indeed. The presidency of Donald Trump, therefore, might not come soon enough. It's clear that Biden, or whoever is working him in his wheelchair, whoever is working the buttons at the bottom of his bed, has started World War III. Because once conflict, direct conflict, between Russia and NATO begins, no one can tell where it's going to stop. As I have explained to you many times, but it bears repetition, alas. As soon as one side or the other begins to achieve dominance and ascendancy, the ineluctable temptation to up the ante, to up the caliber of the weapons will begin. And when that begins, it could accelerate very quickly indeed. It's my guess that if these weapons are used, that Putin will use a tactical battlefield nuclear weapon against the forces of Kiev, forcing NATO to make the decision as to whether to reciprocate. And if they reciprocate, we are into World War III and a nuclear war, a war which could bring about the end of all of us and rendering otiose every subject that we are going to discuss this evening. The clean sweep of Donald Trump, presidency, Senate, House of Representatives, the biggest vote ever recorded by a Republican presidential candidate, a very clear, nearly 4 million strong majority in the popular vote. It is a clean sweep, but what is Trump going to do with it? Is he going to sweep away the trash, or is he going to put some of that trash under his own rug? Perhaps even seat some of that trash around his own cabinet table. Is he the candidate to end the wars? Is he going to be too late to end the war with Russia? Is he going to start new wars? Is he going to double down on the wars that we are already fighting? One thing is for sure. The British will be encouraging the Americans to do just that. It's hard to understand, if you live in Britain, how rabid a dog the British state has become, perhaps always was. The British state, which has a total armed forces, who could comfortably fit into a mid-table English Premiership football stadium, is rabid for war with Russia, for peculiar historical reasons that predate Putin, predate the communists, and go back into the middle of the 19th century at least. The British hate the Russians and are salivating for war. The impeccable, unimpeachable, peerless Grayzone broke a story today by Kit Clarenberg about a secret military political cell operating within the British government, planning a Gladio-style stay-back to keep Ukraine fighting. The British are behind every dirty trick that has been played in Ukraine over this last decade, since the 2014 coup against the legitimate government of that country. And they're still at it. And when they have to be pushed off the books, they form limited companies in order to do it. And they receive tens of millions of British taxpayers' pounds given to them gratis as a grant to continue their efforts to sustain support for the war, consent to the war here at home by setting up their own propaganda, but more importantly, by attacking the propaganda that they believe is stopping them from winning the consent of the British people. As prices rise, as the economy sinks, as the sanctions on Russia demonstrably not only don't work, but are in fact a boomerang, cutting a swathe through Western economies, well, they must smear and label the people that they think are capturing the public's attention, as if the public were idiots and didn't notice the rise and rise of everything except their standard of living. The British have been aching to fire their StormShadow long-range missiles into Russian cities. They've wanted to do it for a very long time. It's been more than 100 years since the British armed forces were able to invade Russia and occupy Russian cities. More than 100 years since the war of intervention in which we had 100,000 British soldiers occupying Russia on behalf of the white cause to try and reverse the Russian Revolution. They've waited more than a century for this. And in the Department of Defense here in London, they are no doubt breaking open the champagne at Joe Biden's decision tonight. It was brought to us sotto voce in the New York Times, as such matters usually are. Certainly, Joe Biden is in no position to come to the podium and announce it himself. The last time he was seen, he was unable to scratch his arse unaided. So, the New York Times has delivered the blow. Well, in the Kremlin, they won't be breaking open the champagne, but they will definitely be unrolling the maps. They will definitely be moving to Plan B. The Israelis are already on Plan B. The slaughter in the Lebanon today is almost beyond belief. Mar Elias is the equivalent of London's Oxford Street, and it was bombed twice today by Israel. Residential buildings were collapsed. Everyone inside them was killed. In Gaza, another residential building was collapsed, and 72 civilians were killed in it. I mention it because you will not have heard of it unless you are on social media. You will only hear of it here on the mother of all talk shows. And some fools wonder why soft power for Western countries is a thing of the dim and distant past. Some fools can't understand that the rest of the world can see what we are doing and can see that we're not even reporting it, never mind condemning it. We are deliberately denying our own citizens the pictures of it. Look at the BBC News website. You will find nothing of the flavor of what I have just told you. Look at the sports pages of Western media. See if it tells you about CelineHaidar, a star international women's footballer, an international footballer of great note, who was cut down by an Israeli bomb this very day and is right now fighting for her life in a critical condition. Take a look after the show at the sports reports. See if you can find any mention of CelineHaidar, and ask yourself, if she had been a Ukrainian international footballer, ask yourself, if she had been an Israeli international football star, would the reports be less or more? It's a no-brainer. You don't actually have to check. You can take it from me that this slaughter, these civilian casualties, are all as roundly ignored as the last residential building that was collapsed, as the last bunch of tents that were set on fire. Well, you know, in a way, as someone who hates everything about what this British state does in the world, in a way I should be relaxed about it, because it's going to make us even more hated than we already are. But my problem is I don't want the British people to be hated, because I am one of them. I am of them. They are of me. And I feel the same for our friends in America, where a vast audience for this show is currently watching and will watch in the hours to come. I don't want people hating you, because if they hate you, they may try to hurt you. Definitely they will try to avoid you, to shun you, to ostracize you. I don't want that. And so I must lament. But I'm not going to keep quiet about what Joe Biden has just decided and about what Keir Starmer will be deciding in the next hours. The main enemy for me is not Russia, you see. The main enemy for me is not North Korea, you see. By the way, whatever happened to those North Korean soldiers that were sent to Ukraine? What happened to the North Korean forces that were operating in Kursk? Anybody seen them yet? Or was that just another big lie? The main enemy for me is not China. It's not Iran. The main enemy for me is at home. The main enemy for me is my own government and the deep state to which it is beholden. And so, like John Maclean before me in the first years of the First World War, I'm ready. If you want to take me in irons, take me. But if you don't take me, and even if you do, be sure that I will oppose your war with every breath that God has given me. Be sure that I will indeed incite them to disaffection. Be sure that I will indeed strive might and main for as long as I shall live against your unjust wars, against your criminal acts, and against the crimes that you commission for others to carry out. This leaves me only time to deal with some of Starmer's domestic enemies. For me, these things are all of a piece. The reason the British government has to steal the coal from our old age pensioners and let them shiver through what's going to be an exceptionally cold winter is because they want to use the money for war and weapons of war, because they want to use the money for perfidious purposes. The reason that the so-called Labour government had to steal the bus passes of our old age pensioners and increase the price of them by fully 1/3 and more. The reason that this so-called Labour government has decided to keep the 2-child cap on child benefit, plunging still more of our 4 million children officially living in poverty into penury once more. The reason why this so-called Labour government has to look for ways to increase the pain and austerity suffered by the mass of the working people in this country is to provide money for weapons and war. Usually they pick on, metaphorically speaking, the cripples, the people who can't get up to stand up and fight back. But this time, they may have picked the wrong adversary. Even before they did so, me and my party, the Workers' Party of Britain, stood full 4 square behind Britain's farmers. We believe in farming. We believe that no farmers, no food is a perfect slogan. We believe that Britain's traditional pattern of farming with farms handed from father to son as they were in turn passed from grandfather to father, is a good way of running our land resource. We believe the worst possible way of running our land and our food security is to hand it over to BlackRock and to Bill Gates. Because that's what will happen if Keir Starmer's attack on the farmers comes to fruition. If it were to fructify, the family farm would be a thing of the past, something to be glimpsed in a museum. The families could not, would not pay the inheritance tax on the death of a working farmer, could not or would not pay the tax, but Bill Gates would. BlackRock would. They're acquiring farmland in every country in the world. And so it's because we believe in Britain, because we believe in the British people, because we believe in our traditions, that we stand with the farmers, and that the first guest on the show this evening is Captain Jamie Blackett, one of those aforementioned farmers. Stay tuned. I'll be right back.
The airwaves. This savannah is a rigid dichotomy of fact and fiction. As Fisher says, the Twitter sphere where the slightest misjudgment can spell being cancelled. One species rules over the airwaves through its ability to adapt and survive in even the harshest environments. The George Galloway. The top cat in these parts, it is mostly active on Sunday evenings in Britain and mid-afternoon in the United States. It seldom roars during the day. Most notable for its wide variety of headdress, it protects these parts from the mainstream media. You can catch this fine specimen on the mother of all talk shows. Don't pick a fight with it. They've been known to bite back.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, there's a big poll tonight. Almost 35,000 people have already voted, and I'm just announcing it now. Is Israel ethnically cleansing Gaza? Yes or no? Duh, might very well be the appropriate result. You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway. You can vote on my Twitter, my X. You can vote on the YouTube community poll, and you can vote on the YouTube stream. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. More than 500,000 people now have done so. Be amongst the in crowd. If you want to call the show, it's toll free in the US and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in the UK and Ireland, 0808 196 5522, and the worldwide number 0044 203 966 2625. Now, Jamie Blackett, former army officer, farmer, columnist, author, a lad o' perts, as we say around here. A Renaissance man, you might very well consider him. He's a farmer with plenty to say, and he joins me now. Jamie, apart from the obvious that Keir Starmer really can't see a group of people that he doesn't need to offend, to rile up somehow, to lose support amongst, why has he picked on Britain's farmers?
Well, it's a very good question, George, and it's partly, I suspect, a cock-up and partly a conspiracy. As I was listening to your lead-in, clearly this Labour government is different to the ones before. It's very easy for me to come on here and sound very entitled as a farmer asking for special reliefs from inheritance tax. But the truth is that it's not just farmers, it's all businesses, all family businesses that are affected by this. And this Labour government, unlike the Wilson-Callaghan government or the Blair-Brown Labour governments, clearly has this view that it's not families that should own businesses, it's big multinational corporations, because of course they don't have to pay a death tax in every generation, but families do, unfortunately. And we've asked for the impact assessment from the Treasury on this new tax. They won't give it to us. I suspect it's because they didn't do it properly. And that's the cock-up part. They were saying before the election that they weren't going to touch APR. And then, of course, once they'd won the election, the budget comes along and they drop this bombshell on farmers. And it is a bombshell because, and this is the bit that they haven't thought through, the impact will be felt not so much by farmers like me, but by all the people that we employ. Because in order to save our farms from being broken up on our deaths, we will now have to spend a lot of money on life insurance. And that's going to rip money out of the rural economy and feed it into the City of London, into all the life insurance companies. And the money that I used to be able to spend on guys who had a couple of diggers maybe who would come and sort out our field drains for us, or the guy who comes and mends the dry stone walls, the chap who lays the hedges, the tree surgeon who works in the woods and thins the trees for us, there's going to be much less money available for paying them. So the rural economy, which is pretty much the gig economy, really, it's people, self-employed people who come and work on farms, that's all going to be really badly affected. This coming on top of the reduction in subsidies, the extra national insurance that employers now have to find, all these things are going to tip the rural economy into recession. And I don't think that the government has done a proper impact assessment. We know from DEFRA that they told the government, and they didn't know about this until the day before the budget apparently, that 66% of farmers were going to be affected. But the Starmer's going around saying that only 25% are going to be affected, which is what the Treasury are telling him. And clearly, that's not joined up government. They haven't thought it through. And the impact is also going to feed into higher food prices, because I'm going to need a lot more money for my milk now, because my cost of production is going to have to include some life insurance, which is, in my case, at my age, is going to be quite expensive, in order to keep going into the next generation, to stop the farm being broken up. So that's the problem, really. And for farmers who are older, there are a number of families where the multi-generational, 2-3 generations working in the farm, the older generation still owns the farm. They may be 80. They've got absolutely no chance of getting life insurance. So when they die, the farm gets broken up and the business goes. People perhaps get made unemployed. And so this policy is not a socialist policy. It's a crony capitalist policy. And it's going to affect some of the poorest in society in the countryside.
The reason that we pay subsidies and so on for agriculture is because of the need for food security. We have to be able to feed ourselves in extremis. We cannot, as I suppose theoretically we could, rely on imports, change our eating habits, import insects from the United States and grow to love them. But because we want to live how we lived, we have to take care of farming so that we can remain independent and food secure. If this goes through and the pattern of farm ownership radically changes, farms are broken up, the children don't inherit the farm, they go off and leave the land altogether. The land's still going to be there. It's going to be bought up by the big corporations, like it has been in the United States, like it has been in many other countries in the world. Isn't that correct?
I think that is right, George. I mean, it's perhaps what would happen, for example, if my farm, God forbid, was broken up as a result of this. The first thing that would go probably would be the farm workers' cottages, which would be sold off to rich retirees as second homes and retirement homes, so that farm workers in future would have to maybe commute in from a town, and there would be fewer homes for working people in the countryside, either as tied cottages or to rent. The next thing that would go would be outlying fields that would perhaps be sold off as pony paddocks, again to wealthy people who've moved into the countryside, and they would be lost to agriculture and to food production forever. And then if the whole farm had to be sold, then yes, you're right, probably it would be bought by some institutional investor who would perhaps never even come here. And I know that because it happened to my family in the 1970s. We had a death duties problem. We sold most of the farm to an insurance company and rented it back. So we went from being owner occupiers to being tenants. I managed then to buy it back 20 years ago from the institutional investor who never even came here, treated it purely as an investment, never put any money into it. And I was able to buy it back. And because, ironically, I've gone from being a tenant to an owner-occupier, we now face a huge cost of lawyers and accountants and life insurance to stop that happening again and allow it to go into the next generation. And as I've said, that the knock-on effect of that is that the maintenance budget is going to have to be cut. We're probably only going to be able to do emergency repairs, and all that money that feeds into the circular rural economy is going to disappear into the City of London. So I'm really angry about this sort of crony capitalism masquerading as socialism.
I saw one of Starmer's chief cheerleaders, former Blair aide John McTernan, formerly of our parish, on Channel 4 News. He said, "We can do to the farmers what Thatcher did to the miners. We do not need this industry." It was an extraordinary claim to make. Extraordinary arrogance, extraordinarily vicious. But are the farmers ready for the fight?
Well, I think we definitely are. And whatever Mrs. Thatcher did to the miners, farmers certainly never did anything to the miners apart from feed them. And we are really angry about this because I don't think the government has thought it through. Had they warned us about it and consulted with the NFU, as they normally do on policy, We could have ended up with a sensible policy that might have raised a bit more tax from farms, but would not have been existential and damaging to the rural economy. And so I think, you know, we already, there are various sanctions available to us. We've already stopped those people who do it. I don't actually, but any farm that takes sewage cake onto their farm to get rid of it, to plough it into the land, they've stopped doing that. So the sewage is going to pile up in the water companies. The government's going to have to deal with that. There have been tractor protests and likely to be blockades of ports. Personally, I think that's a bit premature to be doing that because we have public sympathy at the moment. And if we start blocking motorways and things, then I'm worried that we may lose that. I hope that we can negotiate with the government. And I don't want to get to a situation where the government doesn't have any ladders to climb down because, you know, those positions become so entrenched. So we're going on a peaceful march on Tuesday in Whitehall to try to put our point across. But if they don't listen, and the signs are they're not going to listen, then yes, of course, farmers, we control 70% of the landmass of this country, and it wouldn't be very difficult for us to bring the whole country to a standstill. I very much hope that that doesn't happen. But this is we are standing square on this, particularly with those farmers, as I said, who are in their 70s and 80s, who don't have the option, which hopefully I have, of taking out heavy life insurance policies and things to do anything about this. I mean, they are going to lose their farms. There is no doubt about that. When they die, the next generation that will see their farms broken up. And that can't be allowed to happen.
Captain Jamie Blackett on parade on Tuesday in Whitehall. We'll be there, the Workers' Party and the farmers together. Thanks for joining us on the Mother
George.
of All Talk Shows. A quick break and then it's your call. Stay tuned. Well, first of all, Bob Geldof and his good friend Bono are on the other side. It wasn't for South Africa, it was for the Horn of Africa. I was involved in it at the time. That was my job at the time. And there were many differences. First of all, it was easy because of Cold War politics to take a stand on the famine in sub-Saharan Africa in 1984-85. I did so myself, but it was easy to do. There was no Ethiopian lobby smearing you as an anti-Ethiopian racist if you got involved in it. There was absolutely gale force wind of free publicity from the newspapers and the television about the famine in Africa at that time. There is zero publicity in the mainstream media about the calvary being undergone by the Palestinian people in 2024. Thirdly, the artists involved lost nothing and arguably gained much by being involved in that charitable enterprise. Artists today lining up for Palestine, like the great Eric Clapton, like the great Roger Waters, and I'm running out of names already, would not only not be benefiting from putting on a Live Aid for Palestine, their careers would be destroyed, would be brought to a shuddering halt if they did. So I'm afraid none of the conditions which made possible the Live Aid phenomenon exist over Palestine. Indeed, quite the contrary.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Here's the poll. Is Israel ethnically cleansing Gaza? Yes or no? 35,049 have already voted. Get your vote in before the end of the show. US and Canada, toll free, +1 844 944 3344. Free of charge in the UK and Ireland, 08081 965522. And the worldwide number, 0044 203 966 2625. Let's go to Georgia, where Jamie wants to talk about farmers. Jamie, welcome.
Hey, glad that you let me come on here, man. And I would like to put my vote in. Is it being genocide? Is Palestinians being genocided in Israel and Gaza? Yes, they are. If you can't see the videos of the IDF killing babies and women and people in the streets, you must be blind, or either you're controlled by the Jewish mafia that run the world.
Well, I don't think the mafia that rules the world are Jewish. They're just criminals. Anyway, what do you want to say about farmers?
I want to say, how do they expect us to eat if we don't have any farmers in the world? Do they want us to eat bugs? I think George, who was that? Klaus Schwab said we're going to eat bugs and be happy.
Yeah, I don't fancy bugs myself, and I can tell you that I will never eat them, even if I should starve to death. I shall never eat them. I think it's about ownership, Jamie. They will still produce some food, though less and less of it will be the food that we choose that we would like to eat, but that it will be Bill Gates and BlackRock that will own the land that produces the food. I think that's the point, no?
Yeah, they want us to eat that synthetic meat that they're producing in labs. I don't understand what they're ended up going to do. They're going to push people to the point to where, you know, they're like pushing you to a cliff, and you don't have any option but to fight back. And I think a lot of people have been have kept themselves in control and not just went out and rioted in the streets to take back our countries. And this is going on globally. We see it every day. And it's a group of people they called us conspiracy theorists when we said it was the New World Order, and then they come out and say, hey, it's the New World Order. Well, I thought you said we were conspiracy theorists for saying that. And it's always the same dirt worms that are running this crap. It's the same ones. It's the same ones that here in America, we just had a referendum. Donald Trump took the popular vote. He got the Electoral College vote. He won the House. He won the Senate. And these people need to go to jail. And we need to have executions on the courthouse steps for people that were traitors to this country. And everybody needs to watch it. It needs to be showed in schools that if you're a traitor to this country, you get death. And that's my take on things.
Well, there certainly needs to be a revolution. Let's hope it's more of a bloodless one than the one you have in mind. But thanks for that stirring call from Jamie in Georgia, USA. Now, if you want to send a comment on the YouTube, scan the QR code now and leave a comment. Like DW, who says only 500 farmers are going to be affected by this new tax, GG, and they have 10 years to pay it at half the rate of us minions. I really think those numbers are Starmeroid statistics, DW. Captain Blimp says nobody should pay a tax for dying. If you don't leave a will, your estate goes to King Charles, tax-free. Paul Meany says Jamie is simply standing up against the unelected dictatorship of the World Economic Forum, Starmer ghouls, intent on causing mass starvation in line with their genocides and Holocaust war crime atrocities against humanity. Rachel Thompson says the family farm is dead in America. Factory farming rules all. And Nicola Curtin says, Starmer trying to redefine genocide now that he's being dragged to court either tomorrow or Tuesday. In normal times, there would be zero chance of him being allowed to get away with this. Alas, Nicola, these are not normal times. Matt is in Portland, Oregon, on Trump. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, here's the thing. Trump is controlled by Peter Thiel, who runs Palantir. Trump just came out while he was putting out Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr., those four people who will not be confirmed. He was talking about taking away our free speech over Israel. And Nick Cruz brought this up, and people are going, oh, look, we're getting these breadcrumbs of RFK and Tulsi Gabbard, but look, he wants to take away your free speech. And they're like, but RFK, okay, the guy, but his stance with Israel, okay. But my bigger problem with him is he admitted going to Epstein's Island and having sex with underage girls. That's what breaks it for me, you know, is that he wouldn't have had sex with underage girls. And
how do you know he went to? How do you know he had? How do you know he had sex with underage girls?
Epstein's Island, that doesn't do it for the sex. Everybody who went there had sex with children. That's what the whole point to going to his island. People didn't go there to party with what? Everybody. Bill Clinton finally admitted after denying it.
I don't know that Kennedy went to the island. I'm just asking you to justify what are, if untrue, highly defamatory, libelous statements.
He admitted to going to Epstein's Island. He said, yeah, I've been to Epstein's Island. So, yeah, I've heard him say it. But yeah, everybody gets distracted because he talks about getting rid of, they're not going to get confirmed because Democrats and Republicans don't like Tulsi Gabbard and they don't like RFK Jr. So both of them will fail to get confirmed. And he's just doing that to placate because look who he wants in his cabinet. Marco Rubio, this elite.
Do you really think the Republican senators have the bottle not to confirm Donald Trump's cabinet? Because I don't.
No, they're not going to confirm these people. And then they're not taking orders from Trump. No, you'll see. They're taking orders from Peter Thiel.
He will launch all-out war against any rhinos that stand in the way of his cabinet picks. My prediction is that every one of his cabinet picks will go through. You're welcome to differ, and we'll see who's right. Of course, Mr. Kennedy is very welcome to come on the show to comment on these allegations, but he isn't here to defend them, and it's right that I should say so. Now, the podcast is breaking all records. Huge numbers this week. We're number 6 in Turkey. How does that happen? And in the top 20 in Israel. Top 30, in Israel. We're in the top 20 in Italy and in the top 5 in Slovenia. In addition to all those top 5s, top 1s, top 10s that I tell you about every week. If you want to listen to the podcast, quintessential mother of all talk shows, with all bells and whistles removed, you can do it by scanning the QR code on your screen now. Let's talk to Walter in England, in Blackpool, on food. Walter, what's your point?
My point is, George, that we have got in the recent years, even if not decades, food policy completely wrong, particularly in the international sphere. Now, I think that we should be conducting international relations with countries which have surpluses of food and to whom food matters for their exports, particularly in the third world. Yeah? Now, the thing is that ever since we joined the European Union, we have got this wrong because we cut ourselves off through highly protective tariffs from the third world who could sell us food at reasonable prices and did not leave us dependent on home-produced food. I think we should do that again. There are plenty of countries willing to sell us food at reasonable prices without the protectionism which has food our policy so wrongly up to now.
But Walter, what about the environmental cost of shipping or flying cucumbers from Peru to sit on English breakfast tables? That's crazy. What about the food insecurity that involves? You say they're friendly countries, ready to sell at good prices. What have they become unfriendly? What have the prices become unfriendly prices? And we have no agriculture of our own? We need to have the wherewithal to survive here on our own island. We stand on 1,000 years of coal, surrounded by fish, and you want us to be dependent on food from Ouagadougou or Timbuktu? No thanks. Damien is in Brighton on tax and farmers. Go ahead, Damien.
Good evening, George. George, I'd just like to make a very brief point about Keir Starmer increasing inheritance tax on farmers. I would like to preface my point by saying that I think that Keir Starmer, it's worth remembering that the justification that Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves have used to take away the winter heating allowance from pensioners and now to increase inheritance tax on farmers is the existence of what they claim is a £22 billion black hole in the public finances. And I think it is worth pointing out that they refuse to disclose the calculations that they base that figure upon.
That's correct. Now, tell me this, Damien, because you're an expert in this field. Is that Rachel Reeves, the bank teller, who falsely claimed she was an economist in the bank in her long climb up the greasy pole in Starmer's Labour Party?
Senior Complaints Manager, George. Let's give her her correct title. Just to dig into that a little bit more, she has a degree in PPE, Politics, Philosophy and Economics, and she has a master's in, she's a Master of Science, so she has no formal qualifications, formal economist qualifications whatsoever, and she dealt with complaints.
Yeah.
She was not an economist, so
complaints.
People...
Yes. How can I help you, Mrs. Smith? Oh, the teller was rude to you. Yes, I'll be the Chancellor of the Exchequer in Britain. Damien in Brighton, many thanks for that. Rachel in accounts, she'll always be to me. Now, coming up at 8:45 p.m. tonight, London time, the one and only Scott Ritter is on the show, but only if you're watching on X, on Facebook, or on Rumble. If you're watching on YouTube, you won't see the interview. But if you search for George Galloway on these other platforms, you will find the show. And the reason for those who weren't here the last time Scott came on the show is that YouTube tried to stop us from having Scott Ritter as a guest on our shows, telling us that if he was a guest on our shows, the shows would be removed from the platform. Well, we will not allow YouTube or anybody else to pick the guests on the mother of all talk shows. Scott Ritter is a valued guest of ours, and so he's back tonight, but only on the other platforms, not on YouTube. So either now, find us on Rumble. Rumble's a very good one. Either find us on Rumble now, or at 8:45, there'll be a short break. Retune on the other platforms to see Scott Ritter. If you remain on Facebook, you'll only get elevator music, if we can find any that isn't copyrighted. Now, the poll: is Israel ethnically cleansing Gaza? Yes, 97, 93, 92, 96% say 36,500 people. How about that? Overwhelming. You've still got 45 minutes to get your vote in. Toll free in the US and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. Free of charge in the UK and Ireland, 0808 196 5522. And the worldwide number 0044 203-966-2625. Let's go to fundamentals in Southend-on-Sea in England on Biden. I told you it was the Global University of the Airwaves. Go ahead, fundamentals.
Hello, George. Thanks for taking me call. Great show, as ever. George, I was calling out about the recent breaking news that Biden has given the go-ahead for the long-range missiles to strike deeper inside Russian territory. I do believe that Keir Starmer is actually on his way over to the G7 or whatever it is in somewhere. I forget off the top of my head, but I believe Keir Starmer will announce within the next 24 hours, 48 hours, that he's also given the go-ahead. Now, I wanted to ask your opinion on this, George. Last time I spoke to you, I said I was anxious. You agreed with me. That was when the start of the Ukraine war. I am now worried, George. Do you agree that this is a worrying move, that this puts the UK as a direct, legitimate military target?
Well, I saw President Putin's lips moving in Kazan. I was sitting with him. And I'm here to tell you, he ain't bluffing. No. He said if the Western NATO weapons are fired deep into Russian cities, that a state of war will exist between Russia and NATO. And I said in my monologue tonight that the British are the mad dogs in this picture. Biden is capitulating to a frenzied British lobbying operation to try and force him to do so. Knowing the state of Biden's mental health, he may not even know that he has done so. Maybe someone signed his name for him. But it's done now. It's going to happen now. And the Russian response will happen now. And if we are lucky, it will fall on NATO targets nearer to the Ukraine. If we're very unlucky, it'll come down our chimneys. Fundamentals. It's really as simple as that. We were warned. If you F around, you'll find out. That's our problem. Thanks for the call. Bambala 17, Bambala 7 or 17 says, let Bono fertilize the farmland. Didn't he drive off a cliff or something? Kenneth Marsh says, further, the Indian government that decimated its own farmers indeed had a line of US and other corporations to pick the lifeblood of and from its own people. Fubar. And Lars Svensson says, I would never eat insects or even eat next to someone eating insects. I did the latter once in an Australian restaurant in Austria. Yes, I did get that right. And it was quite a nasty sight. What were you even in Austria for? And if you're in Austria, why are you eating in an Australian restaurant? What is an Australian restaurant, for God's sake? Paul Rettig says, if you kill farming, you kill your country. And Torwind says, YouTube is ridiculous. Scott appears on plenty of other YouTube shows. This is the FBI leaning directly on them because they fear the reach of MOATS. Indeed so. Olivier is in France on Palestine. Go ahead, Olivier.
Hello, George. I'm actually calling from the French, German, and Swiss border, and we all want peace and an end to the genocide in Palestine. And for me, the only solution, in my opinion, which I've been saying for 1 year now, is the following. I am shouting out for a big, massive plea to all Arab people living in the countries of the Arab League. You, the people, need to start a new Arab revolution and throw out all the leaders who betray the Palestinian cause and at the end, the Arab cause. You need to strongly unify and impose massive sanctions on genocide state of Israel. You need to sort out that mess with Israel in the region by yourselves, as you cannot rely on help of the US, no matter who is president, and its Western allies and Iran at all. Look at the map of the Middle East and realize who should be in position of power. Do not let any words or threats from far away intimidate you. Take example on Russia. They do not listen or care anymore what the West is saying at all. Impose the strongest sanctions possible on Israel. Condemn the genocide, call for an immediate ceasefire, withdraw all the diplomats from Israel, expel all Israeli diplomats from all Arab countries, boycott all products from Israel, and companies that support Israel and stop any form of trade and relationship with Israel whatsoever, impose a no-flight zone over all Arab states for planes to and from Israel, expel all Western military bases from all Arab countries, impose a sovereign and independent Palestinian state within the borders of 1967, which will be built with the help and money of the Arab states. No need to ask for money and be dependent on aid from Western countries. And strongly demand that the UN remove the permanent seats of the so-called Big Five nations and the right of veto on any resolutions. Once this is done, Israel will strongly
unfortunately, of course,
the region.
The Security Council would have to agree to that, and there's at least 3 who would veto it. But the powerful case that you make sets us up quite nicely for the next stage of the show, where Leyla Hamed, who's a football journalist, but not just a football journalist, will be joining us. So stay with us. A quick break. Leyla Hamed right after this.
A new dawn has broken, has it not?
He had that Clinton thing. His eyes were round and big and smiley, and he was very charming.
He became this incredible pop idol kind of prime minister.
I think most people who have dealt with me think I'm a pretty straight sort of guy, and I am.
New Labour was backed by the most powerful media interests because they realised he was representing them.
He was caught red-handed trading policy in return for hard cash from a businessman.
America has no truer friend than Great Britain.
Both Bush as well as Tony Blair are now wanting to plunge the world into a Holocaust.
JP Morgan paid him off for the Iraq war. The man is a war criminal.
Is Tony Blair a war criminal? In my opinion, yes.
Most definitely.
The pursuit of money has become the dominant theme in your life.
All these relationships are, in most people's estimation, corrupt relationships.
No previous Labour Prime Minister has behaved in this shameful, money-grubbing way.
How do you sleep at night? You know, it's that. It's as a person.
You get that film, and you get my other film, The Killings of Tony Blair and Killing Kelly, both gratis if you support the show through the medium of Patreon, patreon.com/George Galloway. It will cost you, at minimum, the price of a cup of tea per week. Am I worth it? Well, I hope you think so. And if you do, the most efficient way that you can support the mother of all talk shows is through my Patreon page, patreon.com/George Galloway. Now, Leyla Hamed is a football journalist. There's not many football journalists with 100,000 followers on Instagram. She does because she's not just a football journalist, although she is the best football journalist around. Follow her and see. Leyla Hamed, who is London-based, but does a bit of traveling around the continent. That's why she couldn't be with us last week because of unexpected turbulent weather. It's extremely turbulent political weather, Leyla, in the football world. Thanks for joining us. I'm deeply concerned about the state of health of the Lebanese woman football international, Haidar, who was cruelly cut down by an Israeli bomb today. Can you bring us any update on her medical condition?
Well, thank you for having me, first of all, George. I have been in touch with the Lebanese Football Association, the spokesperson for it. And thankfully, there were some fake news around the state of the condition of Celine. She is alive. She is actually fighting for her life. She is in a critical condition. She underwent surgery last night. It was successful, but she's still unconscious. She's being followed very closely, and well, the medical staff are waiting for her wake up, to finally know what is the damage that's been done to her. So we are still waiting for positive news in the next few hours.
Now, a women's footballer of her stature, it would normally be big news if somebody dropped a bomb on them. Is this story resounding across the sporting press, or are they ignoring it like they have ignored the murder of hundreds of Palestinian footballers, referees, coaches, managers, legends? Are they ignoring it just the same?
They are just sadly and disgustingly, I will say, ignoring it one more time. It seems like when it comes to footballers killed, officials, because we have seen 3 FIFA officials being killed in Palestine, in Gaza, by Israeli airstrikes. We have seen presidents of clubs, all kind of figures that were related for football are currently being ignored by sports media, especially the media in the West. And I'm trying to, I don't want to think it's because of racism or whatever, but it's becoming really, their silence is becoming really loud. I mean, we saw how, for example, talking about media, but also about athletes, because let's remember that they are also silent in these needed times. I mean, there's not been a time where we have needed athletes to speak up like now, just like media and everybody else. I mean, we are witnessing a genocide. We're witnessing an apartheid regime attacking multiple countries at the same time. We cannot forget the background of this, even if we are talking from a sports point of view. So yeah, Celine's story is being actively ignored, just like the other ones. And I feel so disappointed and beyond disappointed because, yeah, I have had just a debate with a journalist, a well-known one, and this evening on the social media, where he will actually say that he doesn't see any connections from these killings and damage on Palestinian sports and Lebanese sports with him or other colleges in the sports media having to report on it. This is completely untrue. I mean, if you decide not to speak up about it, if you don't want to report on it as your own opinion, your personal opinion, yeah, I don't respect it personally, but okay, that's it. It's your opinion. It's your decision. You will have to deal with it someday. But don't say there's not a connection between them, because it couldn't be any more clear. Even before the 7th of October, Israel has been deliberately targeting Palestinian sports, Palestinian athletes in all possible ways. They have been denying them visas to travel around the world whenever they needed for an international call, deliberately, so they couldn't complete their international duties with their national teams. They have been harassing them in checkpoints, and that's if they were lucky, because if you are unlucky, you will get shot by an Israeli forces at checkpoints in the knees, and this is deliberate. You will get even killed, and this is not just me saying it. There is plenty of evidence of these attacks on Palestinian sports. Even during derbies, I recall the final of the cup final in the Jerusalem a year ago. It was in March time, if I am not wrong. Israeli forces just interrupted in the stadium and started tear gassing the players, the coaches, even the fans who were present. So we cannot forget this context. We are past time that Israel gets Israel gets a ban from sporting bodies, from FIFA, from UEFA, from the Olympic Committee. It's past time. They have done more than enough. And which is worse is that most of these attacks have been filmed by the soldiers themselves. It's them telling us all the war crimes that they are committing, not only against these athletes, but Palestinians in general, in Gaza, in the West Bank, and now in Lebanon too. So yeah, I guess sports media is just, they have this shaded narrative that fits them and that goes always to put them in the position, in the side of Israel. It's not even just about the casualties and killings that have been happening in the Middle East, but we also saw it last week when the Maccabi Tel Aviv played in Amsterdam against Ajax. I mean, I have reported myself videos of these hooligans. I call them hooligans to be respectful because, yeah, like you said, I do travel around. I have been to many football games all over Europe, all over the world, thankfully, because of my job. I have never seen fans just terrorizing local people around the city in the way we have seen it in Amsterdam. They have beaten up local taxi drivers. They tear up Palestinian flags from private properties. They have attacked people in the center of the city. They have chanted really awful songs that I have never seen in my entire life being chanted by any other fan base. I have never seen a fan base chanting happily about how there are no schools left in Gaza because there are no more children. This has no precedent what we have seen with that, what has happening in Amsterdam. So yeah, I really can't understand why this silence is coming from all media in the West, and it's really not giving them a good look.
Well, look, it's I'll come back to the Maccabi story because that's a particularly important one to me, having a very large extended family in Amsterdam. But I mean, it's a combination of cowardice and greed that has silenced. I'll spare his blushes, but I was briefly a part of the debate you were having with that important football journalist on social media this evening. And he put in writing, you know very well that you have the luxury of speaking your mind, but I do not. What he meant was he would be risking his fat check if his billionaire employer didn't like what he actually feels inside him. Good luck on the judgment day with that, brother. But it's a combination of greed and cowardice. These multi-millionaire footballers, let me just take the Muslim ones. Let me just start with the Muslim ones in tremendously powerful positions in the Premiership, in Serie A, in La Liga, in Ligue 1. They could be in combination speaking up, but they are stumm, except in a very few honorable exceptions. And those exceptions, because they are very few, are picked off and victimized. Why do you think Hayek is in Turkey now and saying beautiful things? But he can do it now in Turkey. If he'd done it whilst here in England, he would have been dismissed from his job, because unity is strength. You all have to do it. What kind of men are you? You're going to be fasting soon in Ramadan, ostentatiously breaking your fast on the touchline. You think God will accept your fast when you have cravenly, cowardly bowed the knee to what is happening, not just to your fellow Arabs, your fellow Muslims, but your fellow footballers? You're unable to muster the piety to say a word about it. You think God's interested in you fasting until nearly half-time? Get off. The buck stops, though, doesn't it, Leyla, with UEFA and FIFA? They banned Russia immediately. Why can't they find even a single sanction to put on Israeli football?
That is a really good question, George, and it's a question that I would love to give you an answer to, but I really don't have it, because yeah, FIFA's action and inactions speak for itself, and this is going to be a stain on sports that is going to last forever. I can't explain how and why these sporting bodies are risking their values, their standards for an apartheid regime. Is it really worth it? What is this all about? I would like to know. I would genuinely like to know. Why are we just putting at stake even the safety of football fans? Because that's what we have seen in Amsterdam. We have seen FIFA trying to evade their responsibility, which will be to apply their rules. Because let's remember, all these organizations calling for the suspension of Israel are just asking FIFA to be fair, to be consistent. They're asking sporting bodies to respect their own rules and apply it to Israel in the same way they have done it before. In the same way they have done it before with South Africa's apartheid, which played a big role in the downfall of the apartheid. And we could see history repeating itself right now. We could see a meaningful change in the genocide happening in Gaza right now if FIFA did their job. Because yes, we are just only asking not for compassion, not to take sides, which would be just moral, would be human. But yeah, let's just stick to the rules and regulations. We are just asking them to apply them. And no, it's not happening. What they have been doing instead is for over a year, in the midst of genocide, a mass murder of 50,000 Palestinians. And I know I'm just mentioning the lowest of the death toll, because we have reports out there telling us which I believe are the real numbers, because we cannot even ensure that the extension of the damage that Israel has done in Gaza. Gazans don't have the sources to even count their dead. They don't have it, because even that Israel has destroyed it and is continuously blocking it from entering Gaza. They are still blocking international media from entering Gaza and giving us honest reports. But I don't even care about that, because I trust the journalists in Gaza 100%, much more than the journalists that we currently have in the West. They have been honest, they have been spot on every single time, and they have been doing an amazing job despite being themselves, their families, their loved ones suffering the genocide. And if we speak, like you said, about the athletes, wow. And yes, let's focus on the Muslims ones. I'm Muslim myself, by the way. Where are these big voices? I think we haven't seen before so many Muslim players being so relevant in football. And like you say, they're across all leagues in Europe. We have Mohamed Salah. Everybody was waiting. I remember when the genocide started, waiting for Mohamed Salah, the big Liverpool idol, to come and speak up, and like he always done, because he has been very vocal about the Palestinian cause, to come with a strong message condemning the attacks by Israel on Gazans. And all he did was come out with a really cold, neutral statement. That's all he's said so far in a year of genocide. What is this about? I can only count with one hand.
I hope he hears the disappointment in your beautiful voice, Leyla. I have to move on to a last point because of the time, though I could talk to you all night, and I can already tell that the audience feels the same. So you'll have to come back, I hope. But the Maccabi instance, they don't have to believe me. They don't even have to believe you. They can believe the Israeli media and the supporters of the other Israeli football teams, all of whom have voluminously, for decades, denounced Maccabi Tel Aviv as a group of fascist thugs. It is a commonplace in Israel that Maccabi Tel Aviv supporters are fascist thugs. Yet they were allowed to come to Amsterdam and then to Paris, display their fascist thuggery on the streets, and they were treated as if they were the victims of a pogrom. I've been gaslighted in my life, so have you. I have never seen gaslighting on the scale that I saw in the case of the Amsterdam appearance of this group of fascist thugs. Your comments, please.
Well, what we have seen in Amsterdam is definitely not an anti-Semitic attack at all. We cannot forget the context of the events as they happen, from the start to the end. And from the start, like I said, I have been reporting on it myself because we were aware that there will be troubles for this game. That's why repeatedly pro-Palestinian protesters and just sensible people who know about football were calling this game to not be played. We knew something will happen, and we will knew who will start the trouble. Why? Because Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, like many other fans from many other Israeli clubs, such as Apoel Beersheva, such as Maccabi Haifa, who are still, they do play in Euro because FIFA and UEFA still allow it, because let's remember, if they were suspended from international competitions, none of this will have happened. Let's start there. But let's go back to the events that happened in Amsterdam. As soon as these fans arrived in Amsterdam, which were 1 day and 2 days before, there were already footage of the damage that they were doing. They were already tearing down Palestinian flags from private property. They were already burning up flags across the streets of Amsterdam. They were chanting racist chants. They were behaving like thugs, as you said, and we knew this will happen. They fighted against local taxi drivers, and as many other eyewitnesses said, they will just try to pick up, especially target Arabic-looking people. So how do these events in which moment do those media and politicians translate this an anti-Semitic attack? No, what we have seen is the response of local people to violence. Why? Why did local people have to respond themselves? Because Dutch police didn't. That's why they had to do it themselves. Is anybody of us, let's be honest, anybody of us will allow such violence and destructions in their streets? Why your own police doesn't protect you? And we have seen, again, footage of these fans tearing down Palestinian flags from houses. Hey, does anybody think about the family living in those houses? Does anybody think about the children that are behind those windows and how scared they will have been and how surprised they will be to see a Dutch police car just passing by like nothing is happening? That's why the local people had to respond. So this is the result, once again, of FIFA and sporting bodies and UEFA, in this case, to just evading their responsibility when it comes to Israel, to taking action against Israel, because they have been for an entire year and way before that, like we have mentioned, meeting after meeting in which the Palestinian Football Association has raised the question to ban Israel based on multiple grounds where FIFA rules and UEFA rules are violated. They have just delayed a decision again and again and again, at least 4 times. One of those times happened in July. Why? Wow, confidential. If FIFA, UEFA took action against Israel in that moment, they knew it could affect Israel's participation in the Olympics. So they shielded their participation in the Olympics. This has to be the most disgusting Olympics we have ever witnessed. I never expected in my entire life as a sports journalist to be reporting on an Olympic Games in which we have soldiers who have been active in Gaza, who have killed innocent people, to be representing an apartheid regime, a genocidal regime on the biggest stage. People with literally blood in their hands. And in the same events that have happened in Amsterdam, many of these soldiers have been identified. How is it possible? I can't get it in my head. How do we allow soldiers to be killing people? And many of these soldiers were even in Lebanon in active. So it's really recent. How do people and families are supposed to feel safe inside the stadium when they know they could be sitting next to a soldier who is currently committing war crimes, the worst ones we have witnessed in recent history? I wouldn't feel safe. And they shouldn't be able to travel anywhere in the world.
You're a beautiful soul, Leyla Hamed, football journalist extraordinaire. Please follow her, and please, Leyla, come back and see us again. Let me take a quick break, then it's your calls all the way to Gayatri. And then, ultimately, the one and only Scott Ritter, but you'll have to retune at 8:45 to one of our other platforms because YouTube won't allow us to have Scott Ritter as our guest. And we don't let anybody decide who our guests are going to be. I'll be right back. And Robert in the Bronx on Israel will be the next call. Stand by, Robert. I'll be right back.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special announcement. A big thank you to all our wonderful listeners, as the Mother of All Talk Shows podcast is now one of the most listened to political podcasts in the entire world. We are the #1 English-speaking political podcast in the Middle East, and in the last year alone have charted in the top 10 in podcast land in Pakistan, Russia, and China. Like, rate, and subscribe to the MOATS podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts to be a part of the fastest rising independent news show in the world.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
Vote, vote, vote. 38,713 of you have voted. Let's make this a 40,000 vote poll. Is Israel ethnically cleansing Gaza? Yes or no? Vote right now on my Telegram, t.me/George Galloway, on my Twitter, my X, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. I'm not leaving until this gets to 40,000 votes cast. Robert in the Bronx on Israel, as promised. What do you want to say, Robert?
Well, thank you, George, for having me on your show. George, I really think that Israel and the U.S. government will not rest until they destroy Iran. And I think Iran, knowing this, should hit Israel very hard. And I mean hit Israel hard. I mean power plants, waterworks, and kill Israeli civilians in the West Bank. Because nobody had the problem when Israel killed civilians, so no one should have a problem if Iran kills civilians, because they will destroy Iran, and they got to do it before Donald Trump gets sworn in. That's my opinion.
Well, I don't want any civilians anywhere to be killed, Robert, and I think you're going to get your wish that Iran is going to hit Israel very hard and very, very soon. Very, very, very soon. Thanks for the call. Freddie is in San Francisco on Palestine. Go ahead, Fred.
Hey, thank you, George, for having me on. I just wanted to express my sentiment about Israel and the United States and that massive censorship campaign they have going on. You know, it's crazy to me that, you know, me as an American, I was never even really told about what was going on in the Middle East. I was really young when 9/11 happened, and even growing up through middle school, high school, the Arab population was always demonized when I was growing up. And after Gaza, after what happened, it just like opened up this wealth of knowledge. Listening to you, Scott Ritter, Dialogue Works, Norman Finkelstein, reading the Israel Lobby. It just is crazy to me how we can't speak up of what's going on in Palestine that is wrong. And it angers me because if something happens, like you were just speaking about Maccabi Tel Aviv, it's okay to do things like that, but it's not. It's not, and it shouldn't be okay. And me, right now, with everything that's going on in the Bay Area, I'm from the Bay Area, you see Oakland deteriorating, San Francisco deteriorating, but yet all of our money is going to Israel, Ukraine, to stop these things. Like, and it's very frustrating. It's very frustrating because I just feel like a pawn. And I could only listen to you gentlemen with all the wealth of knowledge and the experience of life that you've had. And it soothes me in a way, but at the same time, like, I'm not okay with the genocide that's going on in Palestine. I'm not okay with us working, like, basically for nothing, for minimum wages, and still having to take $500 away from my check with me and my kid and having to send it somewhere else where people are getting killed. Civilians are getting killed. It's not okay. It's not okay. And I wish I could voice my opinion even more, even louder, to stop and to free Palestine, but not just free Palestine, for the United States to stop thinking that it could get in other people's business in the Korean Peninsula, what's going on in Ukraine with Russia. You just expressed earlier in your show that Joe Biden just allowed for those missiles to get into Russia. What about my family? We have nothing to do with these politics, but at the same time, we have everything to do with it. So I just want to appreciate you, George, for always coming on and always being that focal point for what's right. And what's wrong is wrong, and what's going on in the world right now with this oligarchy and everything that's being pushed onto us, that Israel is right, it's not right. So thank you, George. I really appreciate you for letting me speak my 2 cents in this.
No, thank you, Freddie. I'm not being patronizing when I say if that was your debut call to the show, it's as good a debut call as I've ever heard. You're an eloquent and cool guy. You are not a small voice, and you can, if you apply yourself, become a very much bigger voice indeed. The only thing you can do, it's the only thing you can do, is spread the word. You have to get more viewers for the MOATS. You have to get more adherents to your point of view and mine. You have to win the argument of America first. Why is San Francisco now? I'm a freeman of the city of San Francisco, given to me on the steps of City Hall for my work on Palestine, best part of 20 years ago. And as a freeman of San Francisco, let me say that San Francisco has turned into a heap of shit. And Oakland is even worse. Your city is being deliberately degenerated in order that some of the money that could be spent regenerating it gets sent to Israel. You want to tell your neighbors that you're giving money to Israel when Israel has things that the American people don't have. You don't have free health care. Israelis have free health care. You don't have free university education. Israelis have got free university education. Leave the war and the missiles and the material, leave that aside. Why are you giving money to a country richer than yours? To people with a higher standard of living than you? I mean, if I lived in the United States, I'd make that argument sing. Believe me. I'd have people talking about it on every subway. I'd have people talking about it in every workplace. They're really lucky I don't live in the United States. Freddie, great call. From San Francisco, Paul Meany says, in the light of the ICJ findings against the US-EU NATO-backed apartheid Israeli racial genocide, why in the name of God did FIFA allow the IDF Israel War Crimes football team to play? Indeed, as Leyla just so beautifully explained. Fabienne Jambou says French supporters have been lynched by Israeli supporters at the last game, and nobody has been arrested. And Dr. L says it does trouble us to see no retaliation from Muslim countries. All they need to do is stop the oil supply to the West. Indeed. Bidar Show says, well done to Leyla, a true lioness. Shame on every single sports person in the world. Now, you do know I've got another show, right? Here's what it looks like. Join me every week to Have It Out with Galloway. We discuss the great issues of the day and occasionally the odd philosophical meandering through the meaning of life. You can be on the show by contacting us at our website, haveitoutwithgalloway.com. You can be the star of the show. Join me on Have It Out with Galloway. Come and have a go if you think you're hard enough.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, they're hard enough in Liverpool, I'll tell you that. Phil is on the phone from Liverpool on Ukraine. On you go, Phil.
Hello, George. Thanks for letting me speak on your show. There's been a great number of very good speakers tonight. I watch your show. I'm also a patron because we have to support people like yourself.
Thank you, Phil.
No, we have to support people like yourself who are standing up and giving maybe us a voice. And my call is that I feel that the majority of people, and me included, are powerless in the UK. I don't think we're living in a democracy. It's a minority rule. And I'm not sure how the majority can take control again. With the war in Ukraine, it's obvious to anyone who will take time to study the history of it, of where the cause lies and everything else. And I've written to my MP several occasions, Ian Burns. He's wrote back generic replies, towing the line, if you will. But I'm not really sure now, with the way the laws have been written and the way the actual political agenda has been run and the rules are in place, it's almost impossible for someone to demonstrate or to change anything. How are we going to change anything?
Well, I'll tell you what, Phil, sometimes there are decades when nothing happens. And sometimes there are weeks when decades happen. And we have got to be ready for those weeks. So here's my advice to a wise cat like you. Join No to NATO, No to War. Join the Workers' Party of Britain. Get active in politics. We have to change things so that your MPs in Liverpool, for God's sake, would be terrified to send you back a pro-war generic letter. They'd be terrified because they'd know that you'd be breathing down their neck and there would be thousands like you. That's what we've got to get back to in Liverpool, and that's what we have to have all over Western countries. I've got to hurry you on because my good wife has just joined me. Gayatri, what's rattling?
Well, is Israel ethnically cleansing Gaza? We're asking. We are on day 406.
Wow.
We feel as if we are turning numb to it, but we cannot. With the pictures that keep emerging every time we think it's the worst,
it gets worse.
It's unspeakable, it's unheard of, and the global comrade of the great George Galloway Society answers, they are guilty of that and of fascism. They are on their way out for Netanyahu, trying to save his own skin. As Scott Ritter said, Dad is dying, and they can only hold their hand in comfort. His time has come, I paraphrase. And his point about Netanyahu trying to save his own skin, it's similar to Zelensky's case, isn't it? These warmongers, these war hawks, they're only there because if they're not keeping the war going, they're out. MMT for Progressive says, It would be ethnic cleansing if they were being forcibly moved elsewhere. Their entire country is being obliterated and their population industrially slaughtered. They're actually being exterminated.
That's actually true. That's a better description than ethnic cleansing. Ethnic cleansing means at least you stay alive somewhere else.
Yeah.
They're being exterminated. We are living in a time where live on your phone, the extermination of a section of humanity is taking place. It's like if Auschwitz-Birkenau was live streamed and you still did F all about it. That's what it's like. What else?
Listen to this email from Ravindra Bhatia. He says, Is it a thing of gratitude or sorrow that we are alive to witness the purest evil that was predicted upon us so long ago? Israel is Cain and we are his accomplice. We did not stop his murderous frenzy. We do not deserve to be forgiven now for not trying harder to save our dying, tortured fellows. Even if I can face him to look up from my shame, I shall not be asking for mercy I do not deserve. We let the Palestinians down. We could have tried harder. And now we are accomplice to these gigantic genocidal crimes.
Well, you didn't let them down, and neither did Gayatri, neither did I, neither did our children, all of them, all 6 of them. The people who've let them down are the people in power. And we re-elected the people in power. So we share a collective guilt in that regard. We had a chance in Britain on the 4th of July and we didn't take it. We elected the very man who said he was going to facilitate the genocide, who refused to call it a genocide, who refused even to say it was illegal, never mind a genocide. Gayatri, I wrote just yesterday, got quite a lot of traction. As you know, whenever you come in and find me on my own in front of the television, I'm watching the Second World War. There's nothing about the Second World War I don't know, or hardly anything. There's certainly nothing about the Holocaust I don't know. I watch it over and over and over again until the last shots in the lair of the beast in Berlin. And I'm also, there's nothing about what's happened in the last 12 months in Gaza that I don't know either. And how you can look at one of those things, but not the other, and call one a genocide, but refuse to acknowledge the other, indeed to support the other, to arm it and cheerlead for it. I just don't know how you can be human and do that.
Well, in that sense, Ravindra's email resonates, right? We have failed. How we have failed, and also in convincing the others to make them realize what is happening. This Britain that we voted for, James Lenihan says, it is genocide for Gaza, and Starmer wants it for Britain. When your farms are owned by BlackRock and Gates, you get the same poison in your food as we get here in the US. And Paddy continues, he says, we should all have understood Starmer before he was elected. He was a top supporter of genocide, and now he's taking it to the new level with new definitions. Farmicide, kidicide, pensionicide. Notwithstanding, now he's tripping over himself. He's taking us into World War III and failing that he wants to euthanize us all when he becomes useless. He surely is Dr. Death himself.
Yeah, Dr. Death, Keir Starmer. One more then before I have to go to the one and only Scott Ritter.
Yeah, this interview with our friend Jamie Blackett has stirred up quite a discussion.
Oh, really?
Yeah, well, we say no farmers, no food. It seems like an obvious slogan. Not so. In the responses and the comments, Walter Cairn says, it was sad not to have been able to amplify the discussion. I wanted to take part in food policy. I know George wants the best for the third world. So do I, and this is why we should meet their commercial concerns. Agricultural exports are crucial to assisting the third world to catch up with the industrialized West. Thus far, the US and EU protectionisms have prevented the third world from fair trading in this respect. We would never have been at war with Argentina had it not been for the EU-imposed punitive import duties on their meat. So international trade in food has a part to play in world peace as well.
Well, I mean, Walter did make quite a heartfelt plea. I just don't agree with him. I don't want to be beholden to other countries for things that are vital to our national life. I don't want to be beholden to Korean steel or Polish shipbuilding or Burkina Faso courgettes. Much as I'd love to help Burkina Faso, I don't want to be shipping courgettes from Africa. I think that's a waste when we can make and are making courgettes, growing rather, in our own country. And we can have a mix, just like we need a mixed energy portfolio, we can have a mixed food portfolio. But our basic foodstuffs, we have to grow ourselves. Otherwise, we're at other people's mercy. When Saudi Arabia did the oil embargo, it quadrupled the price of oil overnight, quadrupled it. And God bless them for doing it. They did it for a noble cause. But what if they'd quadrupled it again and quadrupled it again and again and again, and we were utterly dependent on their oil? We would have come to a crashing halt. This is why I insist that we have our own energy, our own basic industries, of which the most basic is farming. If we can't feed ourselves, we can do nothing else. Gayatri will take you for chips shortly, but I've got to say goodbye to viewers on YouTube and ask you to join us on Rumble and on X for the big Scott Ritter interview right now. I'll be right there. I defy anyone to contradict the point that I just made, that every person alive today was born of woman. So why would we say that the people in the labor wards, in the maternity units, are people who are giving birth? Why can't we say women? Why can't we say mothers? Why can't we say women who are breastfeeding, mothers who are breastfeeding? Why do we need to say people who are chest feeding? All of these words, and indeed all of the trend that you say you dissociate yourself from, of transgenderism, transmania, I call it, are all taking rights away from women.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
There's nothing that Scott Ritter, former Marine Corps intelligence officer, former United Nations weapons inspector, doesn't know about war. And in the last 25 years, he's had to learn a lot about politics too. And therefore, it's particularly apt that on this night, when World War III may well have been declared, on the front page of the New York Times, that he is our guest here on the Mother You're watching on YouTube, we're back with you now, but 3,900 of you missed that entire interview with Scott Ritter because you didn't move to Rumble. You'll need to check out my Twitter, for Scott's interview later on tonight when it's published, and I promise you, you'll want to have done so. Sparky63 sends $5 US. Thanks, Sparky. Another reason for Russia to completely absorb Ukraine and make it Russia is there'll be no Ukraine for a Bay of Pig-style invasion by the Ukrainian government in exile. Let's take one last call, even though we're past the witching hour now by a full 5 minutes and 11 seconds. It's Peter in Miami. Go on, Peter.
Hello. A good afternoon to you. It's afternoon here in Miami. Before I get further in my conversation with you, I wish to say this to you personally. I am delighted that we have someone of your character and your determination to be on MOATS. I am so pleased that your website and your organization is so much in front of the population, and that every moment of the day someone is joining your organization. I wish to say this to you. I grew up in England. I'm a former colonial, former student who studied in Britain, went to boarding school, and left. I was always confronted with the fact that I was from a foreign country, by the British, by my schoolmates, by my friends in boarding school. I never forgot that. They never allowed me to forget it. But why I read a book by a former prime minister of a country in South America, a former British colony, said the West was on trial. And I think what you are doing is you are putting the West on trial again. And I'm so happy that you have taken up that gauntlet in order to do that job. I wish you all the best.
Well, Peter, thank you. Thank you, my dear friend. You touched me greatly with that call. I should say that not all of the Britishers are like that. The boarding school crowd is a very rarefied subset of the British population. 5 of my 6 children are mixed-race children, and none of them have experienced the slightest racism yet from their fellow citizens, from their schoolmates, from their teammates. 2 of my 3 sons are now captains of their football team, and my eldest son is a runaway top scorer in the league in the northwest of England in which he plays. I mean, a runaway top scorer. When I see them score and I see their teammates of British ethnicity piling on top of them with love and affection and excitement, it fills me with hope for our country, for our people. If we are allowed, Peter, to survive this near brush now with nuclear extinction, I have hope in humanity. I believe in humanity. I believe that we will build a better world one day, and that our children and their children will be the ones to do it. I'm getting emotional now, so it remains only for me to thank the 500,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel. We tried so hard to get there last Sunday. We'd only just come off the air when we reached the 500,000th, and we're powering on. 500,000 on YouTube, 750,000 on Twitter, almost 1 million on Facebook, on Rumble, and on the other platforms that we are on. I have hope that a growing number of people in the Western world are seeking out a different point of view because they instinctively know that the people who rule us are leading us in entirely the wrong direction. It's been marvelous for me. I hope it was for you. I apologize for keeping you late. And Gayatri's getting nervous now because the chip shop closes quite soon. And so I'll take your leave and bid you good night and invite you to join me on Tuesday evening at 7 for Have It Out with Galloway, and on Wednesday for the mother of all talk shows. Good night.